Hi, everybody. Welcome to NewsNite for Friday, November 11th, and happy Veterans Day. It is our first NewsNite since the big election. Tonight, we'll talk about the predictable winners, the upsets, and oh, the color that came with election night. Those stories and more next on NewsNite. A strong turnout on Tuesday led to some big decisions. Let's get right to it. Phil Trexler joins us this week from the Akron Beacon-Journal. Great to have Stephanie Warsmith with us this week. She's also here from the Akron Beacon-Journal. And always great to have with us journalist and contributor Jody Miller. Before we get to the discussion, let's go right to the Akron mayor's race. The result was what was predicted. The response from Mayor Plisquelic during his victory speech to some may not have been. Take a listen.
But let me say one last thing. For that group of people that the Beacon described as a small group of dissidents who spread an amazing or astonishing array of mistruths, exaggerations, and outright lies, not only shame on you for what you've done to try to convince people in this city that we need to sit back and put our head in the sand and not reach out to the world. You don't have anywhere to hide now, Mendenhall and your gang. I'm going after you every single day in the next 4 years to do what's right for the citizens of Akron. I'm not going to allow the citizens of Akron to believe your lies and mistruths and misleading statements and exaggeration. You know why? Because what we do is too important. And the lives of seniors, the lives of working people, the lives of poor as well as wealthy people in this community and business owners and community leaders, and especially our children. It's too important to allow that small group of dissidents to lead this city. As long as I have a breath in me, I'll never allow that to happen.
As long as there's breath in my lungs, I will continue to fight the dissidents of Akron. Stephanie, you and I were both there.
Right.
Were you surprised by this little ad to his victory speech?
Not at all.
Why?
I'm surprised that you were surprised. You know, he has said since the recall that he was not going to stand idly by to let the dissidents or whatever, gang of scoundrels, whatever terms he'd like to apply to them, let them say what they wanted to say, that he was going to correct what they say that he claims is untrue. And so he's really repeating a refrain that he has been saying now for 2 years as he has been under attack 3 different times against his leadership, first in the recall, then in the primary, and then, of course,
but if he's been saying it for 2
here.
years, why did he need to add it to his victory speech on election night?
Because I think that it's something that, since he won another term, he's going to continue to do. And, he will continue to butt heads with these groups and with the people that he thinks support them. A couple of them are on council. And one of them is his primary opponent, Mike Williams. As he would say it, Mike would disagree that he is in with a gang of scoundrels. But I think that Plisquelic's going to continue to beat the drum on this for another 4 years. Surprised,
Jody, that he would bring this up election night?
I'm ambivalent about that question because it was a time when he could bask in victory. It is most probably, given his age, the last time he will run for election as the mayor of Akron. And he could have gone out with a wonderful speech about how, he's got 4 more years to create and to build on his legacy as the longest-serving mayor in the city. But, he never ceases to amaze me when it comes to the lack of maybe statesmanship, especially against a group of people like this who, that's all you have to do. He has laid down the gauntlet once again, and I think that they're going to be ready to pounce anytime they can. And it's too bad because his record speaks for itself, I think. And he could have gone, I think, in that particular speech talking about what he wants to do in the future for the community and leave it at that. And he did not.
I think I was a little troubled by the fact that he talked about spending every day focusing on Mendenhall and his bunch. And it's like, really? Do you really want to do that? I understand that he's offended by the recall. It was 2 years ago. Let's get over it. But he can't. And he's carrying this grudge against them. It's a small band of folks. he seems so obsessed about it. And I know as a reporter, we've all gotten the emails, on a regular basis. We're chasing stories that, are half-truths. We're getting frustrated with it. I understand he's on the receiving end of all this, but in some sense he needs to put them aside. There's so many other problems facing the city. And I thought during his, speech that perhaps act like you've been in the end zone before, be the statesman and show some different attitude, but it's not his personality.
I will tell you, the first few minutes of the speech were very much what you expected. There was a lot of passion there in regards to...
It's not like this was the entire speech.
Yeah, exactly. There was a lot of passion, a lot of thanks. He teared up talking about his mom and dad at one point, thanked other members of his family. He joked about how he and Marco don't always agree, Marco Somerville, the president of council, but that's because Marco's hard-headed, is what he said. So he got some jokes out of it.
He admitted that he's hard-headed, too.
And he admitted that he's hard-headed, and it seemed very casual and going along fine. And then he mentioned about, I'm going to go off script here for a second. And that's where I leaned into my photographer and said, make sure you're rolling, because at any moment could come the soundbite we don't expect. And it was that. What I ask you guys, though, is, does this add fuel to the guys on the other side that Plisquelic is still poking them with a stick, that they will,
I don't think they needed any fuel. I think they're going to, like Phil said, I think they're going to continue to look for, any way that they can to bring forth information. And I think there's value in that, although I do think that a lot of times, the information that they put out, that they're putting their spin on it, we take a look at it and it's not exactly the way they claim it is.
But I was struck by the fact that Plisquelic has talked about people actually believing what he's saying, what they're saying, and they're not. Right. Look at the election results.
Well, and look at the recall. The recall was even more overwhelming. Right. Yeah.
No one's believing this band of whatever he calls them. They're not winning. They're not succeeding. Move on. Yeah. Forget about it. You got bigger problems to.
Well, but he can't. I mean, he takes it personally, and he's got to look at it as just a group that is out there and that is always going to prod him. And Stephanie is right. I mean, in a community and a city like Akron, where it is so slanted democratically, with council, with voters, there needs to be, other than just the press, somebody who is going to hold his feet to the fire. And they in fact do that. Now, are they right? Not necessarily. But at least it's good to know that there isn't a watchdog group out there, that he can't just slip things by, which he has never done, as we have seen in the past. But it still speaks to, it's a democracy, and anybody can say whatever they want, and all he's got to do is he's got 4 more years to run this city and to continue to do the job he's done.
I think the mayor would say it's okay to hold his feet to the fire, just don't you be the one starting the fires. Because that's where the disconnect comes in. Of course, we all expected that the mayor would defeat Jennifer Hensel, and he did, but we didn't know what to expect with Issue 14, the Akron Public Schools levy. In the end, it falls by just a few hundred votes. Now David James says they're going to have to come back with another levy, likely bigger than this one. Was this their best chance?
I don't know necessarily that it was their best chance. It was a great run. I mean, to have lost in this economic climate by that few, less than 500 votes, was absolutely amazing. Particularly given there was a good turnout in this election for an off-year election race. And I think the sad thing from my perspective is. And we see this play out not only in Akron, but in school districts around the state, where you've got superintendents who have a job to do. And the problem is right now, most of them find themselves spending an inordinate amount of time trying to pass levies because of the way the state funds schools.
The results came in after the absentees. The Akron school levy was down 1,000. By the end of the night, it had gotten to within about 300. So I think they realize now that they lost the ground war with the absentees. And early voting, again, plays a part in that almost seems like buyer's remorse. People voted. Then when people actually read more about it, it seemed like people started to support it.
I think Jody's right about the heavy turnout does not bode well for school levies. And you have so many people going to the polls to vote on issue 2 that it was kind of doomed. But the fact that it came within 150 votes the other way, you could have won. And that speaks well for
50 schools. That's 3
that
more
speaks well for their
school.
school
And I think
message.
the fact that they weren't asking for a huge amount. I mean, obviously, any amount in these economic times is tough, but other districts were asking for a lot more. They were saying, look, this is what we need, and we're still going to be cutting on top of that. So, but as a parent who's about to have a child start school in Akron, and obviously, Eric, you have kids in Akron, it's not a good time. Obviously, other districts went down as well, so tough choices ahead for a lot of our
district
districts
is making a
in the
lot of strides, but the economics are what they are.
And that's what I was going to say. I mean, they have closed schools. They have worked with their employee groups to have them contribute more in terms of health care benefits and the pensions, and they have really cut to the bone. You know, administrative staff is down. They have found ways to, in fact, save as much money as they possibly could. And I think that's one of the reasons why it lost by only those few hundred votes. They've made their case, and I think they've done a good job. And in light of all those cutbacks, you know, the district is still moving forward, and that's something that's good for the public to know.
Regardless of what the issue is, to see such a great discrepancy when early voting and then see on Election Day it come way back up, does that point to people voting sometimes before they really know everything they need to know about a candidate or an issue with the early voting?
Although traditionally with the early voting, you normally have people doing it right at the very beginning of the period and then right at the very end. So, but this has, been in, the period of time has been debated a lot and would be changed under the bill that's likely now going to be subject of a referendum.
To 16, 17 days, something like that?
Right, to a shorter time period. So, and early voting actually was cut off this time because of that bill on Friday rather than a lot of times they would have voting on Saturday and Monday before the election. And those would be really the highest turnout days for early voting. That was not permitted this time, which the Secretary of State got a lot of heat for not allowing that.
Well, and to go back to your question also, Eric, what it says is that, if you've got a message and you've got an issue on the ballot, you better be ready with the best part of your campaign to make sure you make your case to voters as early as possible and then just follow up on it.
Well, let's talk about the 2012 pitches to the voters as we move the discussion now to NewsNite.net.
For more NewsNite content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at NewsNite.net.
Name recognition is so important when you go to the polls, especially if you want to win a seat on the bench. We saw a lot of time, money, broadcast, print, otherwise, on one municipal court race, Tom McCarty and Joy Oldfield, in the last 7 days. And we were all watching this one right up to the last minutes on election night.
Yeah, the people with the Republicans and Democrats were watching it too because their polling showed how close these two were. And you talk about name recognition. I think we're all used to seeing the McCarty name. It's been bandied about for 20 years with Judge Allison McCarty, a former prosecutor in a high-profile case in the Doug Parade murder trial. You had Judge Tom McCarty trying to keep his seat on the municipal.
That's her husband.
Her husband on the Akron Municipal Court, and Joy Oldfield kind of coming out of nowhere, not a prominent name in legal circles, ran a heck of a campaign, worked hard, advertised well, front page ad on the Beacon Journal the days or two before the election, pulled it off, and it was viewed, I think, as an upset in a lot of respects because it's not only is he an incumbent, but he's an incumbent with a strong Irish name, and it didn't survive, and I thought that was kind of surprising.
It was an interesting campaign. Lots of signs everywhere, and Joy Oldfield had lots of big signs, so it was hard to miss. And I think Phil's right. This to me was the most surprising result in Tuesday's election, because given the name recognition, as we've said, and Judge McCarty, Tom McCarty's done a good job on the bench, But I'll tell you what. The incumbent judge, or the soon-to-be Judge Oldfield, she pulled it off with, and I think it didn't hurt that she was very well supported in terms of Judge Stormer, Eleanor Marsh Stormer, for whom she has been, I believe, a magistrate. But this was an interesting race that I couldn't believe the figures when I saw them.
Yeah, and it was, I think McCarty was hampered a little bit by coverage of the elections complaint that was filed against him. That didn't help his case. And again, his wife, Allison's lost campaigns too, so it's not an unbeatable name here, but Oldfield is just,
I think it came down to chocolate.
Chocolate.
Why you say?
Because Joy Oldfield was handing out almond joys at the polls. She also used the same tactic at Halloween, and people like chocolate.
So she got the fat vote.
Right, exactly. If Phil could have, he probably would have voted for her.
See,
So,
I could have.
but
it's like
also,
having the Wonder Twins on the show here.
I think that a lot of the Democratic candidates were helped by issue 2 because they had joint flyers that went out that said, vote no on issue 2 and vote yes for Joy Oldfield. These kinds of things, and so she may have gotten somewhat of a boost from that. But I think she just had her name out there. I know that she worked really hard. She was at every single event that she could be at. But I was surprised by the outcome because I think Tom is, like Phil said, is a very well-known judge in the area, very well-known name.
But on the ballot, there is no D and R next to their names.
Right. No.
And you also see in Akron so many people running for judge that you don't know who's running against whom sometimes until you're in the polls.
Right.
You just get used to seeing all these names, Williams and McCarty and Oldfield, and the list goes on and on and on. And I was kind of surprised also because it was her first time on the ballot in something like this. I was also surprised 5 days before the election to receive this anti-Tom McCarty, vilifying mailer that went out to all of Akron. Because up till that point, it seemed like both campaigns were just running this vote for me, I'm a good person thing. I'm not used to that in municipal court races.
That's a result of the polling. They track these, the D's and the R's are really tracking these races, and they know up to the last minute where they're standing and whether they need to throw more money at it or pull back. And they knew that it was close. The Democrats knew that it was very winnable, and so they went full bore after it. And the Republicans tried but couldn't. It was an important seat to lose. Same with the Jim Laria race for Akron Municipal Clerk of Courts. He was opposed, Linda Amobian, great name recognition, prominent Democrat, and there was a lot of fear in the Republican camp about Laria's vulnerability, and he pulled off, I thought, was a strong victory.
Tough to be an incumbent of any kind in these economic times?
Yeah, of course.
I think it can be, absolutely. But I think this was a case where I think voters maybe did their homework, which it was the kind of an election that left me optimistic in some respects, especially about issue 2.
One interesting thing I think too with the judicial race is all women winning. It seems like women are winning the judgeships in Akron right now, which is really interesting. And you have the opposite on Akron City Council, where you're now down to 2 women.
Why is that then?
Why is that?
Why can we put her? I don't know that I have an answer, but why is that? It seems like we have so many women judges.
First off, people are very poorly educated when it comes to voting for judges. There's not a lot out there. The campaigns are generally safe and guarded.
Well, there's not a whole lot you can do either campaign-wise.
Well, I think they've loosened the restrictions. I think you can do that. You can say a little bit more about where you stand on certain things. But I think voters feel safer with voting for a woman when they don't know the male candidate. And I think that's a big reason why there's so many female judges around. The voters are not educated, and they vote for the female.
We do have a woman prosecutor, though. We had a woman prosecutor before that, and Jody's head's about to come off. So
no,
go ahead.
I would venture to say that women are. No, you didn't. I would venture to say that women are elected judges because they're good at what they do. Sorry.
The voters don't know that they're good at what they do.
Sure, they do.
No,
they do their homework.
You're giving them. They're not doing their homework. They don't know. Look at the campaigns and elections across the state of Ohio. In Cuyahoga County, all you need is a MIC before your name, and you get voted in. It doesn't matter whether the people are not educated when it comes to judicial races.
Where do they find that information, though? Because that's the biggest complaint that I hear is that and there's not as many of us in the media to do those election previews. So where do you find out information on judicial candidates?
There's plenty of sites out there that vet the candidates.
Right.
The Bars Association.
The Bar Association in
does
particular. Which was interesting because, if I'm not mistaken, Tom McCarty was highly recommended by the Bar Association. And I don't believe Joy Oldfield was highly recommended. I think she was recommended.
And McCarty I believe, had our endorsement as well.
Yep.
But
the parties, even though they don't have the D or the R next to them on the ballot, the parties send out the cards that say, here's our candidates. And so if you want to vote a straight D or R ticket, you can even take that with you to the polls to vote it.
There was a lot of money behind Oldfield, though. I mean, she had big spots in the Beacon.
Well, and I think that Phil is right about the polling. The parties are tracking these races, and when they see blood in the water, that's where the money's going to go. I think both of the parties going into this race were looking at that, and they were looking at the clerk's race. And they really felt like that could have been an upset with Jim Lariat. In that case, it wasn't. They were able to hold on to that, but they put a lot of money into that at the end. And then, of course, both sides put a lot of money into the
McCarty race. They did not want to lose the clerk's office because that's a huge patronage.
A lot of people over there worried about their jobs.
The same goes in Barberton, too. I think the Republicans put a lot out there on Chris Croce. They were going around talking about Stephen Dyer, a former co-worker of ours, running for judge. And he wasn't even qualified to take the seat until 2 days after the election, just because he's been a lawyer for 6 years. Very little experience. Christine Croce has a long resume, and now she's going to leave the Barberton Clerk of Courts to become a municipal judge there in Barberton. Big win for her.
Another woman judge.
Another woman judge, see?
Right. But I do agree with Jody. I think that Phil's wrong about why they're voting for the women. I mean, I think that they must think that they're qualified or they wouldn't be voting for them. And I think that there might be a tendency among men to vote for the men and women to vote for the women. And so I think there's some qualifications that are going into this.
You can disagree, but you'd be wrong. The people just don't know. They're poorly educated about who they're voting for, and I think they just go with this. They go with the one that reminds them of mom, and that's how they do it.
I'll be interested to see the voting percentages. In other words, if 53% of the voters were women, and then 53% of the votes went to women candidates, I think there might be a correlation there. But
I think there's some men voting for those women.
I think there are too. But I
just feel safer with
I understand where Phil's coming from, but.
No, they're not educated.
I think he's wrong.
Oh, love the great debate here on Newsnight.
On NewsNight.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNight.net.
The nation's eyes this week have been focused on Pennsylvania, specifically Penn State, after a sex scandal breaks out. And this weekend, the eyes will again be on College Station. Is that what it's called?
State College.
State College. I'm sorry. I'm
Happy
getting confused. Not so happy this week, Jody. And we have a lot of Penn State followers, a lot of Penn State families here in Northeast Ohio who are watching this. And you couldn't have written a script like this.
For a man with the legacy of Joe Paterno, for the good that he has done in Happy Valley and at Penn State, not just for the football team, but he has contributed so much to that university. For his legacy to be tainted in this way is one of the saddest things that I think you will ever find anywhere. That said, my reaction was, I think, the same reaction that I am hearing all over the place. He was such an authority figure and such a revered figure at that university. For him to have merely reported the allegation that he received about Mr. Sandusky to his athletic director and then not followed up on it is where he made his big mistake. This is something that just is beyond comprehension my way. This is a coach. This is a man. He was a mentor to so many people that he didn't know what he had to do, and obviously he knew what he had to do, but he chose not to. And how many lives were ruined because he didn't back in 2002 step up and follow through on this? That's something that will never go away.
I have a fear that I don't know, the number of victims is going to continue to grow. I think there's a lot of things obviously that we don't know that the prosecution's not talking about. I think this thing is going to get so much more uglier as it goes along, and it's just the facts in the case are just so disturbing. It's a black mark not only on Penn State, but I think as a society in general, that there are people out here in this world, in this country, who do these types of things to children, and it's just reprehensible, it's offensive, and it's just...
If this is any other department at the university, is there follow-through and this gets handled much, much sooner?
I would hope so. Jeez. I don't know how it can go on for so many years. I've read reports that there were rumors about Jerry Sandusky, the assistant coach, having issues with children and being spotted. There were stories of janitors finding him in the locker room with the boys. It just seems like it was, Penn State's little secret. And it just never really went anywhere, and it's so disturbing.
Is this a bad sign of the times when it comes to college sports that, who knows what's going on at other campuses if this kind of thing can kind of be shoved or ignored because college sports is so big for any university?
Well, just look at the students who are out there protesting and rioting because the football coach was fired.
Misplaced priorities.
Exactly.
Totally misplaced priorities.
Exactly.
And I don't think it's an indictment against college athletics by any means. This can happen anywhere. I mean, look at Jim Tressel, but I mean, I think personally, and we talked about it before we went on camera, what Joe Paterno did not do is far worse than Jim Tressel did.
Oh, I was
because of
say,
the impacts.
Let's make
the
clear that
impacts
Jim Tressel was
on
not
lives.
accused of anything
Absolutely.
like this.
But I guess what it speaks to me is all you got to do is you just do the right thing. And I don't care whether you are the best football coach with the winningest record in college history. You had to know when somebody came to you that there was a question, and you had to follow through on that. That's the bottom line. And I don't know what it is, and I'm going to go off on a rant here. I don't know what it is about college athletics. I don't know what it is about sports figures. I don't know what it is about politicians. I don't know what it is about CEOs who get to a certain point where they think they are no longer, they're invulnerable, that they are all-powerful, and then they make these decisions that impact lives that will never go away.
And what's really sad, too, is that, and by the way, you got my defense of Ohio State in there, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I did.
Thank you. But, the fact that the assistant coach who was doing this had a nonprofit agency where he was supposedly helping
Foundation.
urban, low-income children, and the indictment says that he was using that as, the way to find these kids who are so vulnerable, and was saying, things like, someday you can, play here for us, and, to sort of lure them in. I mean, it is truly reprehensible.
Yeah, and something that I think we're all still trying to get our arms around, that it went on for this long, that somebody didn't raise that flag. Yeah. But you're right about the debate now with the students. And I think as they get older, they may realize they've misplaced their frustration. Jody, Stephanie, Phil, thank you so much. Thanks for being with us. Again, you can watch this broadcast again or our extended editions over at newsnight.net. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next Friday right here for Newsnight. Good night.